It's good to see everyone out this morning. I think got through chapter 37 last week when Joseph was sold down into Potiphar and Potiphar's house, and now we sort of take a little break from Joseph and go back to chapter 38 and get to see a little bit of Judah here and what happens to him. And the thing about it is, remember, Reuben laid with his stepmom, basically one of Israel's wives, and Levi, and I forget the other one, his name, the one that killed all the ones over there when they got them to get circumcised, and they killed all those for their sister Dinah. And so now Judah, and that's basically the lineage, if you think about it, that's basically the born of Leah. Basically, she had her 4 sons before Rebekah had hers. So we're fixing to see what happened to Judah here and what his situation is. So in Genesis chapter 38, in verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned into a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in unto her. And she conceived and bare a son, and he called his name And she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. And she yet again conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chezib when she bare him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar." So here Judah went in again to a Canaanite woman instead of the back home type. And she conceived, and now she's bore 3 sons to Judah. Okay? All right? And, of course, God's not overly pleased with the marriage within the Canaanites. But notice what happens here. And so the first one that was born was and he sort of has, that means watcher. Onan means strength, and Shelah means prayer. But after he took a wife to of his son was Tamar, and Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. That was quick. And Judah said to Onan, which is his younger brother, "Go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother." In other words, make sure he has a son, and it'll be his seed rather than yours at this point from the standpoint of lineage. All right? And see what happens. Onan knew that the seed should not be his. In other words, he knew good and well that it would be considered his brother's. And it came to pass, when he went in unto his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah my son be grown, for he said, lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did." And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So here you see basically first 2, one was wicked, God took him. Next one, Onan said, "I'm not going to do what my dad said." Bam, wham. So, the thing about it is, nowadays, that in Genesis 38, we basically have this situation where that it takes forever to get somebody convicted of anything and put them to get them to pay for what they've done. Ecclesiastes says 8 verse 11, "Because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily. Therefore, the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Basically, when people are not judged quickly for their sins, then it gives them the power and the thought, hey, I got away with it. Let's do it again. These two didn't get away with it. And it was quick. God judged them quick. Well, the book teaches it, period. And so God, pardon? For an eye, and tooth for a tooth. Yep. So we get here, and of course, Jacob here, Judah is going down. That's always the wrong path when you're talking about God. That's always the wrong direction when you're talking about the direction that God wants you to go. Going east or southward is not the best direction. So Jacob gets his 3 sons, and he has a wife for his first one, and he dies because he's wicked. Second one says, no, I'm not going to raise up seed from my brother. God says, I'm displeased with that. Bam, he's gone. And Judah says, oh, shoot, far. Tamar, you go live with your father until my youngest son, and I'll keep him protected. But in reality, what he's saying is, you're a curse. I don't want my family with you anymore. Really, that's the bottom line at this point. It sounds like he's just saying, wait there with your father, not with me and everything else. And so let's see what happens after that, because it gets a little bit more interesting after that. And in process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up into his sheep shearers in Timnath, he and his friend Hira and the Adulamite. So the thing about it is that his wife is passed away, and they want to make sure that, and of course this time has come, and his third son, Shelah, has gotten old enough, but he hasn't sent for Tamar. Okay? So recognize that time frame. All right? And it was told Tamar, saying, behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garments off for her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnath, for he saw that Shelah was grown, which is his son, and she was not given unto him to wife. So she figured out he lied to me. Okay? So, gets interesting. And when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot. Behold, because she had covered her face. And he turned to her by the way and said, go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee, for he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. Okay, so she's suckering him. Okay? You didn't give me your son, I'm going to get back at you. Okay? And she said, what wilt thou give me that thou mayest come in unto me? In other words, what are you going to pay for it? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And basically a kid at that time was pretty expensive, relatively speaking, for that type of service. And he said, what pledge shall I give thee? And she said, thy signet and thy bracelets and thy staff that is in thine hand. And he gave it her and came in unto her, and she conceived by him. So basically, she's conceiving by her father-in-law. All right? But he still don't know it, even after all this time. And she rose and went away and laid by her veil from her and put on the garments of her widowhood. She did this purposely, okay? She took off her widow garments and basically put on this stuff and went out there and seduced him. And basically he took her and had a child, and now she's back to her widowhood. And verse 20 says, and Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend, the Adulamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. He went back to the well, went back to the area where she was, and said, all right, here's the kid, but she wasn't there. Okay, she had already went back to her dad. All right? Then he asked the men of that place, saying, where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. So Judah started saying, uh-oh. Judah said, let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. And so what he's saying is, somebody has my stuff. And I'm going to be shamed because of what's going on, because I went to somebody that I wasn't supposed to go to. But notice what happens in verse 24. So Tamar realizes that he was basically lying to her, and she was not going to get his last son. And so she tricks him, and she gives something personal where she can actually come back and prove who it was that came into her. Okay, that's what she's doing. And Leviticus 20:12 says, and if a man lie with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have wrought confusion, their blood shall be upon them. So that's the law after this point in time. Okay, so Judah did something he wasn't supposed to do either. All right, but of course Tamar was part of it because she basically hid it from him, but it was all one of those situations. So he's concerned about his reputation, thinking that he was trapped. And now she has proof that some Jew came into her and basically lied with her. Then verse 24 it says, and it came to pass about 3 months after, so 3 months she's going to be showing, all right, that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth and let her be burnt. Of course, when she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, am I with child? And she said, discern, I pray thee, whose are these? The signet and the bracelets and the staff. And Judah acknowledged them and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah, my son, and he knew her again no more. So basically, he got told. But the thing about it is, now you're starting to see all these Judah. You had Reuben, you had I can't remember. What was the second son of Leah? Simeon? Was it Simeon? I was trying to find. There it is. Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. Simeon and Levi is the two that actually killed all the ones that had their circumcision. So now Judah, so that's all four in the lineage of Leah, that's basically got in trouble. Did things that they shouldn't have. And it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. Here comes another set of twins. And every time we have twins, we have trouble, right? Between the two. And it came to pass when she travailed that the one put out his hand, and the midwife bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass as he drew back his hand that, behold, his brother came out, and she said, how hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name shall be called Pharez. And afterward came out his brother, and had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Sarah. So finally, we get that situation. She has those, but and the thing about it is, Christ came from Judah. Okay, so and if you notice in Matthew chapter 1 and verse 3, and Judas begat Pharez and Sarah of Thamar, and Pharez begat. So basically, Pharez, which is born second here, technically, because Sarah came out first with his hand, then came out back in. Pharez is in the lineage of Christ. So the thing about it is that even though all these things happen, God still puts, and this is not the first harlot. This is the first one that was in the lineage of Christ. We also have some others that were part of that lineage. So God still used this path to actually give that. But turn over into, and I've got it in the next chapter, but I think 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 1. And notice what it says here. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but forasmuch he defiled his father's bed, he's the one that had went into his father's other wife, and his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph, the sons of Israel, and the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. So basically, all four sons of Leah now have lost their birthright. It's gone all the way down to Joseph because of what they've done from the standpoint of their but that's not necessarily the genealogy, but that's basically their birthrights. So we have all these situations going on with the sons of Israel. We've had all those going. So now we're fixing to get into, go back to Joseph. And again, when we hit Joseph, there's so many parallels to Christ. We always try to emphasize those in chapter 39. It says that Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. He was the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he had to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon him all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught what he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So even though Joseph was sold into slavery into Potiphar's house, God was totally all around him. Everything he did, God prospered. He basically let Potiphar let him have control of everything he had. I mean, he didn't even know what he had, because except for the bread that he was eating, and so God favored him, and the thing about it is, he was actually good, just like the New Testament says to be good, for slaves to masters. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 1 says, "Let as many servants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, that the name of God and his doctrine be not blasphemed, and that they have believing masters. Let them not despise them because they are brethren, but rather do them service because they are faithful and beloved partakers of the benefit. These things teach and exhort, if any man teach otherwise, and consent not to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, to the doctrine which is according to godliness." And in Ephesians 6, "Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling and singleness of heart, as unto Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but with servants as the servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart." So Joseph just basically did what he's supposed to do. And basically God blessed him for it and everything that was going on. And we start looking at all the different parallels. Just in this little piece, a few verses here in verses 1 through 6, notice the parallels. Jesus was sold out. He was sold for the 30 pieces of silver. In Zechariah, we find that Christ is sold. "If you think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear." So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. Joseph was sold for 20 pieces. So they're both sold for silver. And Christ, as Joseph, had God with him in Acts 10:38, how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth, for God was with him. God was with Joseph as well, blessed him. And number 3 there, people saw that God was with Jesus Christ as they saw he was with Joseph. So John 10:41, "And many resorted unto him and said, John did no miracle, but all things that John spake of this man were true." God was with Christ. He was with also Joseph there in verse 3. What Jesus did prospered in verse 3. In Isaiah 53:10 says, "Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him," talk about Christ, "and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand." Amen. So basically Christ was prospered for what he did. And there in verse 4, Christ was over all the house, just as Joseph was over all the house. In Hebrews 3, 1, 3, and 4, "Wherefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest of our profession, Christ Jesus. For this man was counted worthy of more glory than Moses, insomuch as he hath builded the house, hath more honor than the house. For every house is builded by some man, but he hath built all things, for he that built all things is God." Both of them were over all the house. Christ found grace in God's sight, just like Joseph did in verse 4. Psalms 45:2, "Thou art fairer than the children of men. Grace is poured into thy lips. Therefore God hath blessed thee forever." For Christ's sake, God blessed the Christian for Israel for Christ's sake. And there in verse 30, chapter 39, verse 5, and in Ephesians 4:32, "And be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you." And basically, it's amazing the parallels. In the 8th one there in verse 6, God delivered Jesus, he was delivered to Jesus just as Potiphar had delivered to Joseph. And Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, "All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth." And he was over the whole house of Potiphar, just like Christ is over all heaven and earth. And so just in those few verses, we saw quite a bit there, parallels. Then we get down in verse 7. "And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me." Oh, here comes the trouble. "But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wanteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. but not you. That's not there, but that's what he was trying to say. There is none greater in the house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Not against you, not against Potiphar, but against God. It came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, and I'm going to tell you something. That's hard. I mean, a daily bombardment of trying to seduce you. I don't care who you are, what you are in the flesh, that's not something easy to do when you have that power and that authority. But notice what happens. It came to pass as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. I bet she planned it. You know it, because she knew the pattern, she knew the timing. And she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. So he basically did everything he's supposed to do and kept refusing. Finally, she had enough. Okay? So she did this. And it's similar to Christ, the temptation. Jesus was tempted in Luke 4, just as Joseph. And Jesus, being full of the Holy Ghost, returned from Jordan, was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, being 40 days tempted of the devil. And in those days he did eat nothing, and when they were ended, he afterward hungered. So he was tempted just like Joseph. Christ did not sin against God, neither did Joseph. Hebrews 4:15, for we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all ways all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Praise his name. So temptation of Joseph is here, and he got great trust, and Potiphar's wife's coming on him strong and consistently. I mean, she was hitting him up constantly. And we don't know how long that was, but I guarantee it wasn't just a week. I'd say it was quite a while. And she kept hitting. He kept refusing. And then when she caught him by himself, she grabbed his coat. And then she got her mind on what she could do next. The old saying, health hath no fury like a woman scorned. Fixing to come to pass. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of their house and spake unto them, saying, see, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. Her story is not true. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant, which thou hast brought unto us, came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, after this manner did thy servant to me, that is, his wrath was kindled. So, she's going to get even. Yeah, he didn't have no choice. Yeah. He was, but he kept true because God was with him. I mean, and he saw all that. And he knew that he knew the sin would be against God because he said wickedness. And so he knew all that. And so he resisted. I'd say that he was brought up a little bit better than Leah's kids. Is all I can say. Because all 4 of the Leah's kids are now in in the pit relative to God, but Joseph is in his spotlight. And Jesus was falsely accused, just like Joseph was falsely accused. Matthew 26:60, but found none, yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none, and the last came 2 false witnesses. So all this was false, and basically she finally seizes upon the situation that says, hey, he was trying to rape me. He was trying to take me out of force. So Potiphar gets pretty upset. He believes the story. Even though that he had saw what Joseph was all this time, he still believed his wife. You wonder why God didn't strike her down, but he had better plans. And that's the point. He still had bigger plans to deal with because of what was going to happen in the future. Then in chapter 39, verse 20, it says, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were found. And he was there in the prison. But guess what? The Lord was with Joseph there just like he was with Potiphar. And he showed himself mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So basically, he became the most trusted trustee you could have. And here again, Christ was put in prison. Isaiah 53:8 says he was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. Jesus entered into prison where the king's prisoners were. And guess what? He took them captive. Ephesians 4:8-10, wherefore he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive, and gave gifts unto men. Now that he ascended, what was it to be said that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? He that ascended is the same also that ascended up far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. So he took all the Old Testament saints and said, we're going somewhere else. We're taking you elsewhere. But then, and this is one that, although he went down there to take them, of course, there was a great gulf fixed. But notice what happened. In Acts 2:25, for David speaketh concerning him, talking about Christ, I foresaw the Lord always before my face, for he is on my right hand, that I should not be moved. Therefore did my heart rejoice, and my tongue was glad. Moreover also my flesh shall rest in hope, because thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. Thou hast made known to me the ways of life. Thou shalt make me full of joy with thy countenance. And Christ suffered that, what our eternity would be like, to be able to pay for that. Not just the cross. Somehow, some way, God let him suffer hell. And I don't know how he did that, but basically, he paid that price for us. And I thank the Lord for that. So Joseph is pretty much not a whole lot different. And of course, we'll pick up next week there in chapter 40. But I thank God for what he's done. And you think about all the different parallels between Joseph and Christ. I mean, it just amazes me when you start seeing, this is just the first book in the Old Testament. And you talk about all the prophecies that's there with Christ. And it was written all these years before that. So, but he chose just exactly the right things to say to let us know that it was Christ coming. Anybody got anything they want to say before we dismiss this morning? Yep. No. Oh, gosh. Oh, that was good. I doubt that. So, all right, Brother Scott, would you dismiss us in word of prayer?
Lord, once